Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Lawyer Checker webinar, where we're going to be talking about cyber essentials, the questions that law firms want answering and what's changing in 2020. I'm Tom Lyes. I'm a key relationship manager here at Lawyer Checker. I'm joined by my colleague Jen Williams, who is our Chief Cyber Essentials Assessor and lead ISO 27001 auditor. Good afternoon, Jen.
Hi Tom, how are you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. So the aim of today is to help sort of answer some of the burning questions that law firms have been asking us about Cyber Essentials accreditation since we started doing this now about 11 months ago. We want to look at the process, what is required to achieve this, and I've collated these questions from clients that we've met and spoke to over the last 11 months. So hopefully what we talk about today will be relevant and meaningful to your businesses. Hopefully by the end of the webinar, you'll feel more informed about the Cyber Essentials accreditation and the process, and you'll have some confidence in us that we are the right partner to choose to help take this forward. If you have any questions, then obviously we have the questions box on the webinar, which you can type into, and if you type in the questions, if we've got a couple of minutes at the end, we'll try and answer them as we go on the hoof. If not, we'll come back to you after the webinar and make sure that we answered those questions personally. So if we just start by really taking a look at what we're going to cover in the webinar. First of all, we're going to look at where do I start with choosing a Cyber Essentials assessor. We want to look at what is involved in the accreditation process, who needs to complete the assessment, how long should it take, how much should you budget, what does the assessment actually look at, and what is the National Cyber Security Centre changing regarding the accreditation next year, which Jen will sort of fill you in on as we go along. First of all, just want to touch on some of our own research that we've done. So I mentioned earlier that we've been at a Cyber Essentials Assessment Centre now since early 2019. Most law firms have not implemented even the most basic cybersecurity measures. So how we've gathered that information is after conducting some research of 100 law firms, we discovered that out of 82% of those that we spoke to, they didn't have the recommended Cyber Essentials accreditation. So that reason, we really think there's a big gap for us to be able to help our Lawyer Checker clients and those that are not Lawyer Checker clients with this, given our expertise within this field. So Cyber Essentials, or what is it? Jen, do you just sort of want to talk us through sort of how the accreditation sort of came to life and ultimately what it's aimed to do?
Yeah, sure. So the National Cyber Security Centre was set up with the remit of making Britain a safe place to do business. Recognising that a lot of smaller organisations, SMEs, medium-sized, actually contribute quite significantly to our economy. The National Cyber Security Centre wanted to come up with a benchmarking tool that that smaller businesses could use to see how they compared to larger organisations, and that evolved then to form the Cyber Essentials accreditation. So it's really only concerned with the basics of cybersecurity. The National Cyber Security Centre actually recommends that all UK businesses, regardless of size, implement Cyber Essentials, and it just looks at those really basic things, which we'll come on to a little bit later. And the whole idea being that small businesses, medium-sized businesses can protect themselves from the vast majority of cyber attacks without having to spend kind of extortionate amount of money on doing so.
And so just digging a bit deeper on that then, Jen. So Cyber Essentials covers 5 key areas. So you mentioned there about looking at the basics. Can you just talk us through what these 5 sort of key areas are?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we'll start in the top corner there. So, control who has access to your data and services. So, this is all about making sure your firm knows who has access and control over your systems. So, a lot of law firms choose to outsource their IT function to a third party, and it's about how you work with that third party so that you still have control over who has access. So, things like, do you have a register of everybody who has admin access to your accounts? Do you know that when somebody leaves your business that they no longer have access to your systems? And at any one point in time, can you definitively say who has access to what data? Um, Using secure settings for your devices. So this is about looking at things like, have you got a strong password on all of your end user devices? Um, are you making sure that the way your network is configured means that your network can't be accessed without a username and password? So again, it's covering the basics. Firewall protection is about making sure that your own firm's network is isolated from any other businesses so that you can control the traffic that's flowing around your own network. Um, One of the most important ones is making sure that your operating systems and your applications are kept up to date. So that can pose a huge risk to information security. I'm sure everybody will remember the WannaCry attack that infected quite a lot of the NHS trusts. That attack was actually made possible because of unpatched operating systems. So it's making sure that those security fixes are applied in a timely way. And then making sure that you've got anti-malware solutions installed, so you've got antivirus. And actually, not only is that antivirus installed, but that it's configured to be able to scan um, files as you open them or to scan web pages as you visit them.
Brilliant. That was really useful, Jen. Thanks for sort of covering those off, and hopefully the way Jen has surmised that paints the picture that Cyber Essentials isn't rocket science in terms of what it's looking at. And what Jen has correctly summarised is really the basics of cybersecurity. And like many things, if you do the basics right, you go a long way to achieving the end goal. We talk about something here at Lawyer Checker quite regularly called marginal gains. So marginal gains are all about doing the little 1 and 2 percenters that ultimately, when you add them up, make a real difference. And I think those things that fit into those 5 key areas are basically marginal gains. So one of the questions that often gets raised to me when I sit in front of a law firm is, well, we've heard about Cyber Essentials, so we've seen it in CQS, we've seen it referenced in Lexel, but we don't really know where to start with choosing a Cyber Essentials assessor. So Jen, just sort of talk us through sort of some of these sort of key points in terms of how our own process works that helps make this as simple as possible.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So I think we designed our assessment process based on the experience that actually we had when we went through our Cyber Essentials accreditation for the first time, probably about 5 years ago now. Um, and I actually found that was quite a difficult process for us. Not because we didn't have these things in place, but I found it really difficult to actually understand what the assessor was asking for. And I think that's because they mainly talked a different language to what we did. So we've made sure that, so because we specialize in the legal sector anyway, a lot of our Cyber Essentials clients already work with us on account and entity screen and consumer bank account checker. We're really familiar with the kind of language that you use. So we know when you're talking about case management systems, actually how that fits into your firm. Um, and so whereas maybe a different assessor um, might struggle to find the compliance in your answer, I think we're much better placed to be able to do that. I think we understand the typical IT infrastructure of a law firm, so we're able to advise up front where a law firm is likely to struggle with cyber essentials. So in all of the assessments that we've marked for law firms, there are 2 or 3 questions that law firms generally struggle with, and that's just because of the way that their IT infrastructure and outsourcing works. We actually have a consultant in-house who is specially trained to be able to give advice on how to answer the questions. So we also have that available. And so if you do kind of miss out on Cyber Essentials the first time, we'll provide you with a full report that again is in really plain English and words that you can understand, so that you know exactly what gaps you need to address before you resubmit your assessment.
One other thing to sort of touch upon here as well, which comes up quite a lot in our conversations, is that obviously a lot of you that are on the call today will outsource elements of your IT. The feedback from clients who have done Cyber Essentials with us that outsource elements of their IT has been it's been a really good exercise for them to test that what they're outsourcing is A, appropriate, and B, is working as well as it should be. Because ultimately, if you are outsourcing your IT, although their guidance will be really important, the risk still lies with you in that they won't be the one responding to clients or the ICO or your insurers if anything goes wrong. So I think that piece of guidance and advice we've sort of given out quite a lot over the last few months and found that really useful. Jen, do you just want to sort of talk through how our process works? So once a law firm says, yep, we want to go ahead with Cyber Essentials, what happens next from that moment they say yes to the point they effectively pass their accreditation?
Yeah, sure, no worries. So I think the first thing is we will send you some really helpful guidance on how to submit your questionnaire. We'll create you an account on our online assessment portal. We use a third-party assessment portal because that allows us to offer you some free cyber insurance if you're eligible for that. So that's the reason we choose to use the portal. So what happens is you then fill in the questionnaire and tell us a bit about your infrastructure, tell us a little bit about your processes and the practices that happen within your firm. When you're happy with all the answers and you've uploaded your declaration to say that it's all true and accurate, you press the submit button. We get notified that you've submitted your assessment. We'll then mark those within 48 hours, so it's quite a quick turnaround. Now, if everything's fine and we're happy that all of your answers mean that your IT is compliant with Cyber Essentials, you'll get a report and your certificate will be there with that report. And again, that happens within 48 hours, so it can be a quick turnaround. If for any reason there are areas where we feel that your IT infrastructure or your processes don't quite match up to the Cyber Essentials expectations, your report will contain some guidance on what you need to change or what you need to improve. So you go away, make those changes, and you resubmit your assessment, and we remark it, and you do get one free remark within the Cyber Essentials costing as well. And then hopefully after that you'll be fully compliant and you'll receive your report and your certificate attached. All that's left to do then is to sign a branding agreement, and you're free to use the Cyber Essentials badge on your email footers, website, marketing materials, or wherever else you choose.
And I think that's a really good news story to be able to share with clients, that you've gone through that process, and it's a badge of honour to have, and to be able to show to outward facing either consumers or, quite importantly, other businesses that you're working with, that you take this seriously, and it's something that you're proud to have. Couple of other questions that we often get asked. So who needs to complete the assessment? Now, this can vary obviously from business to business depending on the different structures. But Jen, do you just want to sort of talk us through a little bit about the experience of what we've sort of found over the last year in terms of the type of people who've been engaged in the actual completion of the form?
Yeah, I think the honest answer is it's been really varied. So I think that for me, the best assessments that I've marked have been a combination of an IT person and a business person together. Usually practice managers are quite good to be the business person, and somebody from the IT team or your outsourced provider. Some of the questions are fairly technical, so you will need some IT support. When I say they're fairly technical, it means that you need to know things like what version of Windows 10 that you're using. But then some of the other questions are around your internal processes. So what's the process for granting somebody administrator access? Who approves that? And what happens if somebody leaves your organization? Who gets notified and who's responsible for closing down those accounts? So I think for me, it does need to be that combination of somebody who understands the kind of your firm's own practices and somebody who has a technical understanding of your infrastructure. Is it possible to do that without the support of your IT team? Yeah, I think if you're quite on the ball with your IT provider and you know roughly what you have in your business, then it is perfectly possible. I think it's probably easier to involve somebody from your IT team.
Excellent. And in terms of how long it takes, again, I suppose, Jen, the answer to that is we've seen a great deal of variation in that. We've seen some people get certified in as little as a couple of days. We've seen some take a much longer sort of time in which they've gone through the sort of pre-course guidance. Is that generally sort of the key points around that, would you say, Jen?
Yeah, so I think if you're not having to make any major infrastructure changes or process changes, the questionnaire will take you less than a day to fill in. I think the time factor depends on where you're at right now, and I think having that those preparation documents will help you to understand how long it's going to take. Um, so yeah, I think from the point which you think you're ready to go for assessment, it can definitely be quite a quick process.
And just before we move on to the next bit, obviously many of you will be aware of the phrase cyber essentials from this year's CQS and this year's Lexel. And I wanted to touch upon this a little bit today, in that you will see that in both of them the wording says should. I was actually sat next to the lead CQS assessor at a dinner on Friday night, and she assures me that you have to have a very good reason if they are going to assess you and you have not put this in place. One of the instances that I gave her that I've heard a couple of times is, well, my outsourced IT provider says we've got all this in place. Well, your outsourced IT provider is not going to be able to show that to the CQS assessor, who wants to basically see the badge and that you've done it. She doesn't want to have to delve into the questions. So I think just referencing CQS and Lexel is an important thing to touch on. In the future, where do we think Cyber Essentials might go? Potentially, you may see it form part of lender panels, so you have to have it to get on lender panels. I still think we're some way away from that happening. But am I right in saying, Jen, if you contract with government departments within projects, so from business to government department, you have to have Cyber Essentials?
Yeah, that's a new requirement that government, including local authorities, are asking for cyber essentials as a minimum.
And I think we'll see some adoption of that in the legal sector over the next few years. So I wanted to touch upon this at the end today. So what is the National Cyber Security Centre changing next year with regards to cyber essentials? So one of the things that people have fed back to us is that when they've looked at this, they've obviously seen a number of accreditation bodies, a lot of which have acronyms, as I'm sure Jen will tell you in a moment, and which one to choose has been a bit of a stumbling block. People don't really know who to choose or what means what. Jen, do you just want to sort of summarize what the current sort of journey of that looks like, and then how that's going to change from April 2020?
Yeah, sure. So I think right now you're right, Tom. It is quite confusing. So there are five organisations that can accredit businesses like us to be able to certify other organisations. We fall under the IASME consortium. You can see the logo on the slide there. The other ones that people may have heard of are CREST and APMG. Now, what happens is that although Cyber Essentials, whichever accreditation body you decide to go with, looks at similar controls, the way it's assessed it was quite vastly different. So CREST organisations had to go that little bit further to be able to gain Cyber Essentials than IASME organisations, for example. And that's because the target market for CREST is kind of enterprise level organisations. So they do a lot of other services around cybersecurity. IASME, the reason we chose to go with the IASME consortium is because they are set, the SME actually stands for small medium enterprise. So they were set up to make Cyber Essentials more accessible to smaller organisations, and that was something that I really liked about IASME while we were choosing which accreditation organisation we were going to align ourselves to. Now, the National Cybersecurity Centre have recognised that all these different methods of delivery are making it confusing for organisations that want to go through Cyber Essentials. So they actually launched a bidding process earlier this year, and IASME were chosen as the single partner for Cyber Essentials going forward. So from April 2020, you'll only be able to get Cyber Essentials certification from an IASME certification body such as ourselves. And there's a lot of improvement going into the scheme next year. So things like the assessors are going to have to hold higher qualifications. The organisations that are certification bodies are going to have to, well, they're all going to have to hold things like ISO 27001 like we do now. And the whole kind of quality of the Cyber Essentials scheme is really going to improve next year. And I'm really excited to see how that's going to go. But I think IASME have done some really great work, and hence why the National Cybersecurity Centre have chosen those as the partner.
And I think that was one of the really key things that when we started engaging with firms around Cyber Essentials, this was constantly cropping up, and that they just didn't know where to start the journey on. So hopefully next year, we'll be able to see much greater take up across the legal sector, because one of those barriers will effectively be removed, and it will be a simpler process. And a good job we chose to align ourselves with IASME. Hey, Jen.
Well, it wasn't luck.
Exactly.
It was a conscious choice.
So how much should we budget? So cost of Cyber Essentials. So it's a fairly small outlay at the beginning when you look at what it could be potentially worth in the long run. So the cost of Cyber Essentials is £350 plus VAT. It's an annual renewal, so obviously you'll test it every year, which will take into account for any changing infrastructures that may happen, and you'll sort of fall into a renewal process with that. So our sort of next steps for you from today's webinar is there's two next steps ultimately. So put yourself in two camps. If you'd like to book a free 15-minute consultation with us to see how easy it would be for you to gain the accreditation, you are more than welcome to do so. If you're confident based on what we've talked about that actually, look, I'm happy to go ahead and get Cyber Essentials accreditation with Lawyer Checker, you've given me enough information, then again, it's just a case of letting me know. I'm going to put my slide details up at the end, so you've got my contact details. So it's just a case of dropping me an email and confirming if you'd like to go ahead with the consultation, or if you'd like to go ahead with getting the assessment, and I'm sure we can get one of our electronic contracts over to you by the end of the week. Since we started this earlier on this year, we've obviously worked with a significant number of law firms. This is just where feedback from one of our clients, which is Bell Lamb and Joinson Solicitors in Cheshire, which talked about some of the support that we provided them through the process, and the guidance and advice that we were able to give them. So I'll leave mine and Jen's contact details up on the screen. if you'd like to go ahead with the consultation, please drop me an email. If you'd like to just go ahead and get the assessment, and we get the contract over to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much for tuning in today, and I hope you found that useful. If any of you would like to drop any questions over to us, then obviously you've got our contact details if we haven't covered them in the webinar. But hopefully that was interesting. Thank you very much for your time, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Goodbye from me.